going to be around the human aspect and the leadership aspect that we need to focus on as we look at building organizations for the future, for success in what we call the post-digital economy. A lot of the management philosophy that we've grown up with just is not keeping pace with the speed of innovation in 2021 and beyond. So a little bit about me before we go into all that. As Mark said, I'm a partner and enterprise advisor at Scaled Agile, and I also run our SPCT and experts program. So taking all the years I've spent in the field doing work with clients across all industries, world round, trying to build a program that's going to really help the most advanced safe professionals be successful in helping organizations embrace new ways of working. When we look at the mass disruption that's taking place in the world today, we need a new way. And the risk that we see is if we don't start figuring out how to help a lot of the legacy organizations that we all serve as consultants, if we don't figure out how to help them thrive in this new world, this new post-digital way of working, there's a very real possibility that all of us are going to be working for one of 5 or 6 tech trillionaires in the next decade. And one of the things I love the most about, the consulting space is the diversity. So to me, that's a really scary thing. We want to create a world that's a very impactful place to work in, and that allows us to deliver great value to our customers, whoever they are. So that's kind of what I do day to day. Me personally, because hey, we're all a lot more than just the things that we do day to day. My wife, Janelle, she's a nurse. She's had a rough year with COVID. So we've been very fortunate to finally be able to get out and relax. We just got back from Mexico 2 days ago. We got to see the world a little bit, dust off some of those passports and crazy things like that. As you can see, we're pretty active. I still like to pretend that I'm young. I still race motocross and dirt bikes and things that I probably shouldn't be doing because I hurt for a week afterwards, but I do it anyway. I also do a little bit of triathlon. My wife and I have got a dog down there in the bottom right. Her name's Ellie with her cousin Louie. And we just spend as much time as we can outside with our family, just enjoying life. That's kind of what it's all about. That's why we all do what we do. So we do our best to live it to the fullest. All right. So our topic at hand today, what the heck is this post-digital economy that I'm talking about? So when we look at what's taking place in the world today, we understand that the environment that we work in, the environments that our customers serve their customers in has changed. We talk about this idea of post-digital economy. What that refers to are the technological revolutions that have taken place throughout history. There's been, the Iron Age, the Industrial Revolution, and this concept of digital and information. That's the most recent. What's interesting about digital is that it hasn't followed the same linear path as, say, the Industrial Revolution. There's the innovation phase where we figure out these new ways of working, how these new methods can help us. There's the installation period where organizations invest capital to really exploit the new technologies. And then there's the period of time where we really start extracting the value from those investments. And it's very linear. Technology hasn't been that way. We've gone through this period where we experiment and start to invest, and then technology kind of reinvents itself again. So we've been in this swirl of defining the new technology and deploying the new technology and then starting over. And what we've learned is that that's just the way of the world now. The way the innovation works, the pace at which things evolve changes constantly. And our best tools that we have to succeed in that is resilience. So understanding that, it's time to stop talking about digital transformation and start thinking about what's next, this post-digital economy. What does the world look like? How do we start serving our customers? How do we start delivering value in a way that exploits this variability that's going to be always in place with that system, with how we explore new technologies, how we figure out how to do things like AI-driven development? What does 3D printing and desktop manufacturing really mean to the world at large? There's so many cool things taking place in the world today, and we've got to figure out how to best deploy our leadership systems and our people to exploit all of those cool things that are taking place. So before we can talk about what it is that we're supposed to do, we need to reflect on how we got where we're at today, where management theory came from. And largely speaking, it came from the Industrial Revolution. This was the first time in human history where the output capacity of people could be amplified by machines. People were no longer doing the things, they were feeding the machines that themselves did the things. And management thought this was great. We can bring people in here, we can have these machines running 24 hours a day, and we can essentially print money. And that led to some not great working conditions. As you see in this picture, those people don't look like they're over 18 years old. They look like they're children. And we had a lot of young people working in factories in unsafe conditions. People were working long hours. People were getting hurt. And at some point, labor said, enough, right? We're not going to do this. We have rights. We need lives. We need some protections. And the government stepped in and we talked about how workers should be treated. This was the development of at the time, what was called scientific management theory. It was developed by a man whose name was Frederick Winslow Taylor. And the idea of scientific management theory was that we need to get as much out of the system as we possibly can, while also remaining in compliance with the laws that could get us in trouble. In short, under Frederick Winslow Taylor's theory, HR's function was to protect management from the employees. And if you look at a lot of the history of HR and a lot of the mechanisms that we all work in, it feels that way. Now, when we look at how things have changed, right? You know, what took place in the early 1900s has evolved some, but probably not a whole lot. Jack Welch did some evolution of that theory at GE, but it was still very much, we're going to lead with carrots and sticks. We're going to incentivize you to stay compliant with the system and punish you if you don't. We probably have all experienced in our careers the concept of the annual layoff, where the bottom 5 or 10% of performers in the company are then, flushed out and we bring in new people. All that did was encourage people to be just compliant enough, do just enough so that you're not in that bottom 10%. And then there was also the top 5% that were rewarded with the best reviews to incentivize, well, if you work really hard, this is what could happen. But for the majority of people in the system, 85%, they were just stuck in that middle. Come in, be compliant, go home, repeat. So what this created in our work environments was a highly competitive world, right? Where you always had to beat the person next to you so you weren't the lowest ranked person on the team. This created distrust. This also created the development of fiefdoms, where if I have this thing that I know and nobody else does, well, I'm going to protect it, because as long as it's important and I'm the only one that knows it, well, then I'm safe from the layoff. And then those people would get in there and kind of build organizations and extra process to really solidify how important their thing was. The point is, a lot of the toxic things that we see in corporate environments today are a result of this mechanism where we want to assure compliance in the system in a mechanism where we're largely certain about what needs to be done to deliver value. When you're building a car, you map out that manufacturing process, you can tune it to precision and know exactly if certain inputs are met, certain outputs are met. And we've tried for a lot of years to do the same thing with software, and we've learned that that doesn't work. Software development is a highly variable thing. So no matter how much we try to micromanage that process of development, and no matter how much we try to apply scientific management theory in the GE way to those problems, the outcomes don't yield the expected results. What's scary is that in 2021, the things that we're doing with technology have much greater consequences for errors and for negligence in the system than any time in history. When we were maybe developing an ERP, when we were maybe implementing a new HRIS, if we had some bugs, it probably wasn't that big of a deal. But when you look at what we're doing today as businesses, we're doing things like creating automated diagnostics for cancer. We're doing things like using machine learning to create vaccines for emerging viruses in less than a year. That's what happened, over the course of the last year with the COVID vaccines. The point is, and if you look at self-driving cars as well, We don't want people doing that highly complicated, deep technical work to be competing with the person sitting next to them. We don't want them to be doing sabotagey things to try and look better than that person. We don't want people to be afraid at work, thinking in the back of their mind, if I screw this up, I'm going to get fired, right? Because then the negative consequences start coming out. Mistakes start to be made. Mistakes start to be made and not owned up to, because we have this environment that assures compliance and fear. And that doesn't work for the solutions that we seek to deliver in our new world with these highly technical, amazing things that we have at our disposal to solve some of the world's most complicated problems. So what we need to really succeed in that with those new technologies is a revolution in how we manage people. So when we talk about this idea of people agility, the new talent contract, what I call modern management theory, there's 6 themes that we focus on. There's the new talent contract, continuous improvement. When we hiring for attitude and cultural fit. We want to focus on iterative performance flow as opposed to big year-end performance evaluations. We need to take the issue of money off the table and support impactful learning and growth in our organizations. Let's dive into those. The new talent contract. People today who have the skills that are marketable have no shortage of opportunities. No longer can organizations hold people essentially prisoner, thinking that this is the best place to work and you've got nowhere else to go. We need to start understanding that, especially with what we've learned in the last year with remote work, people can be successful working for anyone, quite literally anywhere. If you look at where a lot of the larger insurance and banking institutions are founded throughout the United States, a lot of the times they're founded in cities that really have nothing else. So if you're an insurance company based in a small town in the middle of America, and there's nowhere else for you to work in that town or within a reasonable commute, you are essentially stuck in that organization. That organization was the primary employer in your town. That organization was building baseball fields for your kids, was investing in your schools, and they might not have treated you great, but I mean, that was your life, and that's the system that was built. Again, that was to reinforce compliance to that enterprise, to that model. Today, people have all the mobility in the world. They can work for anyone from anywhere. It's been proven the last year. And what's also interesting about this is that people are talking a lot more today than they ever have throughout history. Conversations around career that used to be taboo no longer are. People will talk about salaries. They'll talk about enterprise cultures, things of that nature. So when we talk about the new talent contract, what we're really shifting is from this concept where human resources exists to protect the enterprise from the people to one that says the new mission of HR is to assure a best-in-class employee experience from hire to retire. I mean, that's the ideal value stream, right? We bring people in, we bring the right people into the organization, and they stay with us throughout their career. Proverbial happy path is they retire from us. And if there's alternative exits, either they choose to leave or we choose to separate. We need to make sure that those experiences are curated and as good as possible as well. So when we talk about the new talent contract, it's focused on the people that work for the organization. It's about optimizing that employee experience. The second piece is to foster continuous improvement. And what this means is that we start creating an environment that's safe for innovation, one that promotes experimentation, that promotes sharing mistakes, sharing lessons learned so that we can fail forward together. So, focusing on no matter how good we did something yesterday, we can do better tomorrow. We need to actively figure out how to do it. And when we do this, we create an environment that promotes the development of the whole, right? So as a team, it's about how do we improve as a team? When it's an agile release train, it's how do we improve as a release train? How do we better serve our customers? How do we create empathy with our customers? How do we create best-in-class technology solutions for the future? This is very different than a lot of corporate environments today, where mistakes are essentially career-ending. right? If you have a project and you pitch a project and it doesn't go well, in a lot of organizations, that's it. You're probably not going to get another project to work on. But when we talk about innovating and we talk about experimentation and exploration, this concept of continuous, relentless improvement, always picking things apart, always finding ways to get better, has got to be baked into our DNA. The key to this is psychological safety. We've got to create an environment that allows people to feel comfortable with these behaviors. As a senior executive, I can't mandate to you that you feel comfortable and to have psychological safety. I have to lead by example. I have to show empathy. I have to show humanness. I have to own my own mistakes and share them broadly so we can all learn together. We've just developed a new program that Mark will have access to. It's called Leading by Example. And it's essentially a cohort hybrid learning where over, I think it's 4 weeks, there's 3 half-day sessions as well as some self-paced learning that really focuses on what does it mean to lead by example? What are some of the new leadership behaviors that we need to develop to be successful in this new world? For me personally, as a learner, where are my strengths? Where are my weaknesses? And how can I improve? We also dive into our own individual biases that helped develop our own philosophies for leadership and management. It's a pretty cool program. It's called Leading by Example. It's just coming out now. And like I said, Mark will have access to that once he takes the exemplar. When it comes to hiring people, we've all seen job postings that look like a technical spec. It's all of these nuanced experiences and skills and specific things that realistically very few people can match that profile. So what you could be filtering out are some really amazing people. And here's the reality. The skills that you need today are not going to be the skills that you need in a year. We're probably not going to bring somebody in and then fire them in 6 months when their skills are no longer relevant. What we need to look for instead is, one, people who fit our organizational culture. Who are we? How we behave? How do we behave? What sort of people best represent our customers? Because those perspectives are going to help us be better. If, for example, you are an organization based in San Antonio, Texas, hiring for cultural fit doesn't mean that you only hire people from San Antonio, Texas. You want to take a look at who the demographics are that represent your customer base. If you've got people that are in Alaska, you've got people that are in Boston and New York and rural America, you need to start figuring out how you can get all of those perspectives represented in your organization. So that's the cultural fit aspect. When we talk about attitude and also aptitude, we want to look for people who have demonstrated the ability to rapidly learn, develop, and master new skills. Because that's the currency of the future. When you look at the work by a gentleman, his name is Cal Newport. He wrote a book called Deep Work. And he talks about how in the future, the most valuable things that any of us can learn are the abilities to focus on deep technical work and learn new skills. Because again, the skills that we need to master to be successful next year probably haven't even been developed as a thing yet. Right? So we need people who can figure out how to dive in and learn those things and apply them quickly. It's not about having exactly 3 years of this very specific experience. It's how well have you shown your ability to adapt and change and learn throughout your career? Have you shown a willingness to try new things? And again, that cultural fit. Are you someone that's going to be able to come into our team and elevate us? Those are the most important things. The resume is a piece of marketing material. How a person fits in your organization, how they fit on your team, and how they're going to make that team better. That's what we want to look for. When we talk about iterative performance flow, I wrote a book about this late last year that talks about how we can begin applying new ways of evaluating performance in an old system. So if you're in an organization that promotes individual performance evaluations once a year, there's still ways you can work within that to promote what we call iterative performance. And what we look at here is, don't wait to give somebody feedback. If as a leader, you wait until the end of the year to tell somebody they screwed up, that's your fault, not theirs, right? And if somebody's surprised at the end of the year, they have a negative performance review, again, as a leader, that's your fault, not the person's. That feedback should have been given the moment it was an issue so that person could address it. Mostly speaking, the performance management system is, again, it's not about the individual. It's not about improving performance. It's about ranking people. It's about fitting people into that bell-shaped curve that says, who's at the very top, who's at the very bottom. We're going to lay those people off. And then everybody else, you're in the middle. Has anyone ever felt that way when you fill out a performance report or annual performance plan, that it's just an exercise in checking the box? Largely speaking, it is. We need to figure out ways how to promote the behaviors that we want in that system until that system changes. And we'll talk in a moment about how exactly you can do that. When it comes to money, money is a funny thing. And there's a lot of problems that we still have in the world today that we shouldn't have. Things like gender pay gaps should not be a thing that we talk about in 2021. We need to get better than that. We need to eliminate those issues. And I will say that the US federal government does a very good job of promoting transparency and equality in their system. So the general schedule, the GS scale, tells everyone transparently what everyone else makes. It also tells you what you can do to make more. If you learn specific skills, then you get more money. If you live in a specific zip code, you get more money. I was working with a client maybe 2 years ago now, and they hired a new team of engineers straight out of college. And some people, maybe had different coaching on how to negotiate salary than others. Some people felt weird about asking for more money. So there was a lot of pay disparity on this new team. Not uncommon for the corporate world, but what's different is people are no longer afraid to talk about money. One of the first things these people did was compare their salaries. And there were some upset people. Those are problems that we shouldn't have. That's creating friction that's just not necessary. Clear and transparent pay schedules that show people how they can make more money, that show people differences for things like where you live, right? If you're a software engineer based in, Columbus, Ohio, your salary is going to be different than somebody in San Francisco. It costs infinitely more money to live in San Francisco than it does in Columbus, Ohio. So yeah, you're probably going to make more. But if we can show that here's your base and here's the cost of living adjustment, there's going to be a lot less argument about these sorts of things. We also need to figure out a way to pay people in a way that makes them not worry about money, instead of always trying to get the best deal for people. We need to figure out if we hire the right person, what's that person worth to us? Let's pay them enough so they're not worried about money, that they're not going to jump ship and go somewhere else over 5 or 10%. The amount of money that you save by not having to backfill somebody will pay itself off many times over just by doing the right thing and paying people fairly and transparently upfront. Dan Pink wrote a whole book about this. It's called Drive. It talks about how what people really want in their workplace is mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And if you can give them enough money so that they're just focused on how do we master the skills, how do we work well together and on our own, and what's our purpose, you get a much more profitable, efficient, and effective system. We also want to support the learning and growth of people. A lot of organizations, have professional development dollars and they're allocated to all of us, but in a lot of organizations, it is next to impossible to actually get to use those funds. If we expect to be successful in this world, learning has got to be a part of who we are. People reading books at work, sharing what they've learned, taking new skill development classes, no matter what your skill is. We've got to be organizations that constantly learn and evolve. And the learning can't be reserved for only the most senior people in the organization. If we want to grow, if we want to be strong and we want to be able to impact the world, we've got to learn new things fast. One of the things that I love about organizations like IBM is that I know you have this kind of baked into your DNA. I used to work for a large consulting firm, and there's a lot of good things that I could say about them and a lot of not great things. But one thing that I will say that it was amazing was how free the people were to learn. The access to self-paced learning, the access to be able to spend your professional development dollars, the encouragement to spend that money at the end of the year if you had not. it was an important thing. When you look at firms like IBM, you know, the firm can't bill for you all as consultants if you don't have marketable skills. So with IBM investing in you to learn new skills, they get repaid with that for that by being able to bill you to new clients and new engagements to do different things. And if you learn cutting edge skills, well, then they can do it at a higher bill rate. You impact the clients, you better impact the firm. There's a lot of really cool things that go along with that. Learning is it though. When you talk about the most important currency for the future, it's how well and how quick can you learn and master new skills. I like to kind of tease students all the time in classes that I teach that, if you thought that you were done learning when you graduated college, I mean, I know had I'd be unemployed today, right? We are always learning, we're always studying, we're always reading, we're always evolving. And if you do that and you can do that well, you will never in your career be at a loss for opportunity. So again, creating the time and space to learn and to grow together is a really important thing. And finally, compliance doesn't go away, right? We still need to be a compliant company. But as we look at compliance through HR, we need to figure out how we can be as compliant as possible while also embracing Agile Manifesto Principle number 10, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. All too often, I'll work with HR teams or insurance organizations or banks, and all they talk about is compliance. Everything they invest in is compliance because bad things happen if we don't do this compliance thing. And what I've seen happen more than a few times is organizations will invest years in compliance only, and then their customers fire them because you haven't stayed current with the products and services that we need. Sure, you're compliant, but your mobile banking is garbage and I can't do the things that I need to do. So there's a balance between how we invest in compliance, which compliance things that we do, and which we quite honestly do not. My favorite example is a few years ago, I was working with a bank and I was working with one of the senior executives who was charged with becoming compliant. And there was a 1 year, in terms of workload, a 1 year initiative that would take about $10 million in hard spend and time from people to satisfy. And this was compliance. We have to do it. And I asked this leader a question that very few do when it comes to things like regulatory and compliance. And that was, what's the deficiency? What's the regulation? What was the finding? What is the evidence required to become compliant? And what's the fine if we don't? In this example, this 1 year, $10 million undertaking, the fine was to the state of New Jersey for $500 a month. So for $6,000 a year, this person was looking at investing a full year's worth of capacity in $10 million to save $6,000 a year. What we did in the end is we just paid the fine. And we instead took that same capacity and money and invested in things that the customers, the end users needed. So that's a hard question, right? People in organizations have trigger words, things like regulatory, things like compliance. They make us behave in a funny way. Those words create a reaction. And people know this. And what they'll do is typically take a small finding, bundle in a bunch of other stuff they want to do because it helps them win over their peers, and then say it's regulatory or compliance and everybody runs around. And we spend a lot of money correcting something and over delivering on something that probably just wasn't necessary. So when we talk about building transparency in the system, it's asking those questions. The same as you would evaluate any other work for economic return and fitness of purpose. For compliance things, those are the questions we want to ask. Again, that's what was the finding? What was the regulation? What was the deficiency? What is the evidence required to become compliant? And what's the penalty if we don't? Some things will be, well, cease and desist. We can't do business. Those things you have to do. Other things, if there's a fine, if there's a monetary penalty, that's a conversation. Economically speaking, sometimes it makes sense to just pay the fine. So when we talk about organizational agility, people are the key, right? All of these other things that we look at in terms of building lean agile teams and delivering products better and building large complicated systems in a meaningful, iterative, highly engaged way, how we evaluate strategy and fit strategy with execution, And how we behave as one organization is all about people. People do the work. What we need to be able to do these things effectively so the customer can be at the center of our universe is start exhibiting these new behaviors. In leadership, people in leadership roles, either by position or by reputation, are the ones that have to start exhibiting these new behaviors. It's all about the people. It's all about changing the system, and only leadership can change the system for the people to better serve the customers. So those are all great things, Adam, and they're large systemic changes. It'll take organizations a long time to wrap their heads around and deploy. Get it, tracking, what can you do today? Here's 6 things. As a person who would be hiring a new member of your team, focus on finding the right person, not the perfect resume. Figure out what skills do you need on your team, what personality would best fit with the team. Personality fit is a big deal. When I ran my company, we used to use the DISC assessment to figure out how people would work together in the organization, and also how we would build engagement teams. Figuring out, again, who is the right fit for that team is a really important thing. And again, the right person with the aptitude to learn the right skills is much more valuable than the person with the right resume who becomes toxic to the team. So again, find the person, not the resume. 2, incentivize outcomes over outputs. It doesn't matter what percent complete you are, red, yellow, green. I want to know what outcomes are we delivering for our customer, whoever it might be. Something that's 57% complete, it's not done, it's not delivering value, it's of little use to me. What are those outcomes? In every context, that'll mean something different. I challenge you to figure out in your own context, what are the outcomes that we seek to hit, that we seek to deliver, that we hope to achieve? And how can we start looking at incremental progress towards those outcomes instead of just vanity metrics that are largely focused on outputs? We want to incentivize team performance. If in your organization, you still have to go through and work with the big annual performance review, there are still ways to incentivize the behaviors that we want in that individual performance review. Create goals that are focused on team behavior, team outcome, team dynamic. And again, don't wait until the end of the year to give performance feedback. Give it incrementally, give it as the information is relevant, and seek to coach your teams, the people that you work with and work for. This whole notion that management holds all of the information and the teams just do, that's gone. The whole dynamic of leadership and managers and people is shifting. We are seeking, or we're rapidly changing from a model that directs people to one that develops people. Figure out how you can start learning those skills. How can we start developing people and giving them the opportunities they need to grow to make us all successful? Number 5 is a hard one. Seek the hard right, even if it's uncomfortable. Ask the tough questions. If you're being forced to stack ranked, push back. If someone is trying to shove a compliance thing down your team's queue, push back. Ask the hard questions. Well, what is this thing? Why is it important? Help me understand how to better serve you. Finally, number 6, there's a book that my wife and I've adopted that really kind of helped us through the last year. It's called The Daily Stoic. And what it is every single day, it takes a different piece of philosophy and it challenges you to apply that piece of philosophy to your daily life. But the idea is that in being stoic, we seek to be much more thoughtful than reactive. We want to figure out ways to solve problems and to address problems in a calm, cool, collected way, to always promote the greater good for our system over personal advancement, and always seeking to understand and empathize with people in our organization who might be having a hard day or a hard time. Figure out how to be that humble servant leader to guide your organization to a better, more successful tomorrow. So some traits of that Stoic Agilist. Again, this is straight out of that book, The Daily Stoic, right? We want to focus on discipline of perception, of action, of will. And there's some key traits for each one of those there. I've got a post about this on the Scaled Agile blog. It's called The Stoicagilist. Check it out, scaledagile.com under resources and blog. And if you need more information about surviving performance reviews, I've got that book on Amazon right now, or you can find it directly through my website at adammattis.com. And Mark, I think that about covers my spiel. If you want to open it up to questions. Oh, one other thing. If you want to learn more about this topic and maybe take it back and present it to your teams, my keynote from Safe Summit last year is available at the bit link here. It's a 10-minute video that really summarizes a lot of what we just talked about with some additional actionable advice. So you can either forward this recording or check out the People Agility Delighting the Team so the team can delight our customers video at that bit link provided. Mark, back to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Adam. I think that's great. And honestly, one of the things that stand out a lot for me to manufacturing and how manufacturing works. You refer back to how our city setups, and exactly like a few years back in the city, you will have one bank. So as an example here, I would mention to Surmathi, she's in Waterloo. We have Sun Life headquartered there. Everything in Waterloo is just about Sun Life. Everything in Waterloo about Sun Life or Google, because that's the big two headquartered in there. So that really speaks about today, how our today life is going in that. So that's really great. Thank you for that.
Yeah, work from anywhere. That's been a really cool thing we've learned over the last year. My wife and I have been able to kind of relocate and take advantage of those opportunities and live a little bit different of a life.
Yeah. Even in IBM, actually, IBM Dominic, which I forgot which IBM sector, he sent actually an offer saying that, you know what, you can work from here anywhere in the world. So that's great. Thank you, Adam.
Real great. Certainly.
Thanks, everyone. Any questions to Adam? Take the advantage of him being here. By the way, Adam is a very important person. So I'm happy he accepted to talk to us.
Adam, this is Bruno. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Bruno, I got you. What's going on?
Yeah, so I'd like to hear your thoughts a little bit more, actually, because you covered that about the annual appraisal cycles, right? Yeah. And how to, at the same time, to recognize best performances, right? And to identify these people and reward and recognize somehow. I understand that removing the money from the table is something important, and it's a mind change for many companies. But at the same time, not like socializing the environment, the company environment, so everybody is the same, right? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about your thoughts, how to identify and recognize and reward talents.
Sure. So we need to understand that the system is going to behave based on the way that it's incentivized. If you look at individual incentives that most companies have today, they're tied to vanity metrics, right? So if our company performs well, you'll get a certain percentage of your 10, 15, 20% projected bonus. But here's the reality. In a large organization, no individual contributor has the ability to impact that EBITDA, right? No matter how hard I work, no matter how frugal I am in my travel, I will not impact EBITDA, which means that the performance incentives that are in place today are really not tied to anything performance related. They're not tied to outcomes. They're tied to how we stack rank our people to determine who gets what percentage of the total pie. And it's counterproductive and it's a little bit toxic because you're never gonna be able to get the team dynamic that we need to build those really great outcomes if everybody on the team is competing against one another. So we need to start looking at how can we incentivize the outcomes that we want. If it's an organization, if it's a team, we need to make sure that those people have the opportunity to actually do things to achieve the outcomes that will reward them. When it comes to individual growth, I mean, there's two separate things we want to look at here. There's the team dynamic that we want. We want to incentivize and reward team performance. Beyond that, there's going to be individual goals and drivers that are outside of that. In a team, if you have one person who's always the hero, you're not going to have an effective team, because that person's going to kind of steal the show. The rest of the team's going to resent them, and that team won't be as effective as they could be. So again, we need to separate performance from personal growth and development. So there's a book by, what's her name? It's called Radical Candor, written by Kim Scott. And she talks about, in her book, there's two types of people we hope to have on every team. There's rock stars and superstars. Superstars are people who will come into a team, maybe be there for a year or two, be highly impactful, and then go on to another opportunity. They're on a steep growth trajectory. It's important to have those people that bring awesome energy and they do great things, but we need to understand that they're going to move on. And as a leader, I need to understand what it is they hope to do next and help them develop to achieve whatever that next step is. And part of being a career coach, if you will, when we talk about leadership as a service, again, the relationship of management to people changes. So one of the things that I'd want to do for the superstar as this person's manager is figure out how I can leverage my own political capital in the organization to help this person get to where they need to go. The second type of person on the team is the rock star. And those are people who come in, they're on the team, they're high performing, but they're really just happy doing what it is that they're doing. They're happy being on that team and being an effective team member. And how you will help that person and how you would develop that person is very different than how you would the superstar. So again, what we want is team performance and teams that deliver outcomes as directed by whatever our business objectives are. So that's where the performance comes in. When it comes to individual development, that's a separate conversation that can't be tied to performance. When we tie individual performance to rewards, you get heroics, you get politicking, you get gaming, you get, I saw in one organization where this woman, she would go in, she'd create bugs in the software so that overnight on the weekend, things would break, and she would run right in, no matter what time of night it was, and fix it. She was always the hero, because by her playing that hero role, it got her advancement and it got her more money. It wasn't until several years later that a new manager took over that chunk of software and saw what had actually happened. Those are the behaviors that tend to emerge in people when we incentivize things like heroics, when we incentivize things like you winning over one of your colleagues. So again, understand that the system will perform based on how the system is incentivized. Figure out what you need from your system, incentivize that behavior, and then figure out other mechanisms to help people get where it is that they want to go that doesn't involve creating toxicity in a team.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you.
Sure, man.
Adam, this is Saramati here. Great concepts on people agility. Sounds like a dream if organizations around the world can actually implement and start practicing all this. Is there a use case or a white paper available somewhere in the Scaled Agile website, which we can refer to about organizations who have adapted into these concepts and have, tasted success?
So it's a funny thing. When organizations figure out the cultural element that helps them win, they're super reluctant to write it down and share it with their competition. When you look at some of the most successful organizations in the world, nobody writes about their culture, because what makes them unique and special is what is their differentiator in the market. What we have on the Scaled Agile site is an advanced topic article on this very topic. If you look at like HBR, Harvard Business Review, and even Gartner, they do some independent research on these topics, and allude to companies, but you're not going to see again specific companies named with specific practices. What I would encourage you to do is look at companies who have really thrived over the last year. Companies like CVS, companies like FedEx, and take a look at what their leadership is saying about their organizations. And then also seek out organizations that maybe haven't been so successful. Organizations that struggled with remote work, organizations that struggled to deliver really anything last year or even respond to the crisis. I think if you do that research, you're going to find the organizations that have started embracing these new philosophies and also those who have not. And, unfortunately, with the way that the world, fortunately or unfortunately, right, these ideas are not really optional, right? Organizations that embrace this new way of managing people are going to be successful, and those who do not will be disrupted and be out of business very, very fast. I mean, if you look at the rate of turnover on the Fortune 500, it's relentless, or as my brother-in-law would say, it's outright savage. It doesn't matter how old you are or how established you were or how amazing your company once was. It is a very rapid fall from being a great organization to being a footnote in history. So, I mean, again, you're not going to find a lot of organizations telling their story, but if you do a little bit of research, you can figure out who's jumped on board.
Okay, thanks.
Surely.
Adam, I want to reflect also on one of the aspects you mentioned,
Sure.
which we really speak about in LPM, and that's really the motive behind that. Because even in Agile transformation, people tend to go back to the norm that they used to, because this is how they are rewarded on. This is how they are measured. No matter what you speak about flow, if you are measuring me against my utilization, that's what I'm going to do.
The biggest barrier to successful adoption of an Agile way of working is the long-term bonuses that are tied to executives. If I have a long-term bonus, which is typically 3 to 5 years in most organizations, that speaks to things like project delivery, I can tell you to be Agile all I want and to do that Scrum thing, but I'm still going to speak in terms of projects because that's what my long-term bonus is going to reward me for. And again, when we look at the reward system, people behave based on how they're incentivized. We need to start addressing how senior leaders are incentivized. Again, focusing on outcomes, not outputs. OKRs are an emerging trend of how we start tracking that. But again, it's a rare occasion where an executive will say, I recognize the right thing to do, and despite my long-term bonus, I'm going to do it. Many will say, I recognize the right thing to do, and I will be all in when I can renegotiate my next long-term bonus. That's the reality of, a lot of the times in organizational transformation, we'll essentially hit a glass ceiling where we are so effective and things are going so well until a point. And largely speaking, that point is someone who is incentivized by something other than the change we're trying to make.
Then just another thought here.
Sure, Berta.
To be very transparent with you, I didn't put some thought on my question or my comment here, but again, also interesting to know where you go. What about, or maybe you saw this in other companies, what about recognizing and rewarding teams by PI planning?
So
I mean, very agile, very, you know what I mean?
I think that's great. If your organization will jump on board with that, I think that could be fantastic, right? But again, you want to be careful, because if you start looking at things like, if you hit your PI predictability, you get a reward. Teams are always going to hit it because they're now going to start writing objectives that they know they can hit because they want the reward, right? When you look at the outcomes that a portfolio seeks to achieve, you don't have feedback on those outcomes at the end of a PI, right? So if you identify an epic and you have a hypothesis about that epic, you're probably not going to know it until that work is done and it's in the market for a while. And again, when you start incentivizing those sorts of behaviors, you're going to start to squash the spirit of experimentation, because I'm only going to promote work that I know I can get done so that I can achieve the reward. I like to use the SpaceX example. The goal of SpaceX is to colonize Mars. With that said, they're failing, not even remotely close. If you look at the pursuit and the experimentation that they go through every single iteration to try and get there, there's a whole lot of failures. Starship blew up on the pad, 4 times before it landed successfully. If I create a mechanism that rewards only wins, they probably would not have launched that rocket even 1 time yet, until they wouldn't try it until they were certain that it would land. But their ability, and NASA came out and said this not too long ago, I want to say maybe a month ago, their freedom and the safety that they have to launch a multi-million-dollar rocket and blow it up over and over and over again is what enables them to do the really cool things that they do. So there could be some ways to incentivize teams and reward them at a PI boundary, but you need to be really careful about what those incentives are and what behavior they're incentivizing. If you focus on things like PI predictability or things like velocity trends or whatever, they're always going to hit it. And they're always going to be leaving opportunity and learning on the table in pursuit of hitting that thing. So again, just be really careful about what you're incentivizing, because the teams will perform exactly based on that incentive, whether it's the right thing or not.
Good, very good. Good insights. Thanks again.
Sure.
There's one more question from me.
Sure.
Sorry, I'm taking the advantage of asking many questions. So in SAFE, basically, we say that transformation comes out of that burning need. The organization feels that they want to change. They want to scale agility to an enterprise level, reach that tipping point, and then they create that collision, which actually catalyzes the change. But when an organization is transforming in rest of the areas, preferably nowadays I see that organizations who are very young and not very matured in their transformation journey, who's just starting to make their hands dirty, they all start with their IT transforming into agile or safe or whatever we call it. So when we want to see this idea of people agility, where we want to talk to the HR department of the organization, the need of changing their framework or changing their thought process about whatever reward system, or the way they recruit people, onboard people, and things like that. How do we actually onboard or pitch this idea to the HR? Because they always say we are okay with whatever system we have. We are running the organization well. Leaders are satisfied with our performance. So why do you think we need to change?
So there's 2 reasons why we embrace change. One is either there's proactive leadership that says, I see change on the horizon and we need to be ahead of it so we can continue to win. Or there's a burning platform. Really bad things are happening, and if we don't make a change now, the organization is going to cease to exist. So those are the two ways we get to the tipping point. And also remember that safe and agile are not the goal, right? Our goal isn't, we don't say we've got a burning platform, we're going to do safe and everything's going to be fine, right? There's got to be a why. We've got a burning platform and we need to achieve this thing to survive. And to achieve that thing in the fastest, most expeditious way possible, in a way that allows us to be nimble for the future, safe and agile ways of working will help us get there, right? So we don't want to embrace an agile transformation for the sake of transformation. We need to embrace a transformation so we can achieve some other objective as a result of having changed. And way too often, organizations miss that, right? They're like, things are bad, we're going to do safe and everything's going to be great. And then 99% of the time, those transformations fail. because they're, looking at the Cotter change model, there wasn't a vision for change. There wasn't a compelling reason. Leadership didn't understand what it is that they're supposed to do. They didn't understand the change that they're asking the organization to make. All right. So again, the change is a means to an end. We have a problem. We're going to do this thing differently so we can achieve this outcome. Right. That's what we want to focus on. The comment that she made about a lot of these transformations beginning in IT, and the reality is that's where a lot of them do. And the reason is because organizations say we're not winning in business because IT is slow. Okay, so we start transformation there. And then IT is really good at delivering. And the next thing is, well, we've exhausted our backlog of work. The business is really bad at defining what needs to be done. And that's where the transformation really starts separating from IT to being an organizational thing. Part of the digital transformation is an organization understanding that there is no us and them. There is no business in IT. It's we all together. Every business in 2020, 2021 is a digital business that reaches its customers through technology in some way. If an organization doesn't understand that, and they don't understand how technology is tightly coupled to the business processes that customers interact with, they're going to struggle, right? So when we look at agile teams, when we look at agile release trains, when we look at portfolios, it's not an IT thing, it's an organizational thing. There's people who understand the operational value stream and how the business operates. There's the people that understand the developmental value stream and how the technology supports the operation. And then there's the things that overlay that, such as the customer journey, and so many other things that help us be more efficient. So again, digital transformation is about eliminating us and them and thinking we all together. Organizations that you could look at who have successfully done that, you'll see roles such as CIO and CTO go away and be replaced with things like the chief digital officer, the chief product officer, things like that. And when you see that, that's a real clear indication that those worlds have started to come together to deliver a better digital experience for whoever the end user is. When we start looking at, and here's the thing, right? You're going to be hard pressed to find an HR person that is not familiar with all of the things that we've discussed today. It does take time to change that system and structure. There's things that, like the 6 things that we looked at, that you can start doing today. Like with any other transformation, it typically will start at the top, start at the bottom, and meet in the middle. So there's probably strategic conversations happening about cultural transformation in an organization, rethinking the employee experience. Those are very top level things. Then there's things that we can do on the individual level, such as how we structure performance reviews, how we hire, how we act and behave as managers, embracing this leadership as a service model. And then over time, those 2 things will meet in the middle with the new behaviors that have emerged to be successful at the ground, and with the strategy of the organization being clearly defined and rolled out. And again, that's not dissimilar to how any other transformation takes place in the organization, where, years ago, agile transformation started with a team over there. And then over time, it became an organization-wide thing. Like with any change, being a change agent, it doesn't happen fast. It doesn't happen easy. It requires a strong stomach and some steel resolve, but the outcomes are always worth the effort.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Surely.
Thank you, Adam. That was great. Thanks
Right.
everyone for attending, and looking forward for